Welcome, fellow bookworms, to Timber's Den. My name is Whitney, and today we have our February wrap-up. So February was a good month. It was a weird month. It was good in some ways, but I really kind of struggled with the books. I did end up with mostly 5 stars, which kind of surprised me when I was putting it all together at the end of the month. Most of them were 5 stars, but it really felt like I kind of drug my way through the books. So I did complete my game TBR. I did have some extra books that I did not end up getting to, but as far as my game TBR went, I actually completed it. So that was fantastic. I'm very, very happy with that. So I do earn another reward for my game, which this just means I can use this in place of a honey jar prompt and forgo the honey jar prompt if there's just one I'm not really feeling that month. I still have my reward from December too, so now I'm up 2 rewards, which is fantastic. So that will come into play whenever I feel like I want to use it. So there is that. And yeah, I did do Battle of the Girl Bands, which was put on by Rainy at Rainy Blue Reads. Their channel will be linked down below, of course, and then there was a bunch of hosts, but I'll just link the original video, so if you are interested in it at all. Last year was Battle of the Boy Bands, so hopefully next year they'll do something again, because it's a lot of fun. And I was on Team Spice Girl. There was also Destiny's Child, Cheetah Girls, and TLC, so kind of a mix there. But it was fun, and there was only 2 books I didn't get from my team, and those were the extra ones I added, but I was able to steal quite a few books, so that was great. And let's go ahead and get into the stats, and then we'll get into the books. So I did read 5,535 pages. 13 of those were physical. I had 1 digital and 1 audio. Audio hours was 10 hours, 58 minutes. I had 13 fiction, 2 nonfiction, 1 reread. Top moods were adventurous, emotional, and mysterious and dark were kind of equal. Genres, again, the genres overlap, so some of these books fit multiple genres. So I had 10 fantasy, so it was definitely a fantasy heavy month. 5 romance, 2 middle grade, 2 young adult, 2 historical, 1 classics, 1 magical realism, 1 thriller, 1 poetry, 1 memoir, and 1 biography. And I don't, probably Harry Potter's the other middle grade. I was like, I thought I only read 1 middle grade, but maybe not. So yeah, 15 books were read. I originally started with 9 prompts. I had 8 extras I added, and then I had 4 rollovers, but I did end up just reading 15 books. But like I said, I did fulfill all my prompts, so I'm happy with that. I only had 1 haul, and it was actually a gift from Mariana, so thank you. And they sent me this Dark Descent by Kaylin Josephson. And this is one I am super excited for because I heard about it and I was like, that sounds right up my alley. It has to deal with horses and kind of um, darker tones, it sounds like. So I was really happy to get this as a gift, and I'm hoping to read it sooner rather than later. Mariana said no pressure, but I want to read this. So they definitely picked a good one off my wish list. So thank you again so, so much. I really appreciate it. So hopefully I will get that, like I said, sooner rather than later because I'm really excited for it. And then I also started a new mini game, and that is Honey, Winnie the Pooh Honey, which is just basically bingo, and it just kind of helped me narrow down my reads for the month. Obviously, I'm trying to stick with my TBR, but it started off as 48 hours, and then if you saw the video, if not, I'll leave it linked down below as well. But it started off as 48 hours, then a week, and then turned into a little over 2 weeks. Because again, I just kind of struggled and I was dragging myself through these books. But that was a lot of fun, and it kind of helped me narrow down. So I'm definitely going to be playing that again in the future. And yeah, I think that's all that. So let's go ahead and get into the books. So I'm going to start with the ones I didn't get to, then any of the ones I'm rolling over, and then we'll get into my star ratings. So the first one I didn't get to for my team was Coming Out by Danielle Still. This again was an extra. I added it for the prompt to read a book that you have been considering unhauling. My grandma gifted me all the Danielle Still books. She had like almost the entire collection. And so I've been considering going through those books and deciding what I want to keep, what I might be interested in reading, and getting rid of the rest because they're taking up a lot of shelf space, and I'm not necessarily all that interested in all of them. So this is one that I looked through. It was short, and it definitely is one I'm considering unhauling, but it'll just go back on the shelf. And at some point, I will be going through all of them, and that one might get unhauled. I don't know. The other one, which I'm very interested in reading, was for the Scary Spice prompt, which was horror, and I was going to read Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. Again, this was an extra one, but I'm really, really excited to read it. It was a gift for Christmas, and I just didn't get to it, so hopefully this is another one I really would like to get to sooner rather than later. But for now, it will go back on the shelf. The other one was just an extra because I wanted to um I'm reading the series this year, and I was trying to read one every month. I'm changing that, so it's going to be one book for every 2 months, because the first book in the series I took me the first week of the month to basically finish, and I had already read some of it in January. And so that was Dragonfly in Amber by Diana Gabaldon. This is the second book in the Outlander series. This one is going to roll over though. I've made it part of the official March TBR because I had put the third book on my March TBR, and I had mentioned if for some reason I didn't get to this, it would just swap out. So this is actually officially on the March TBR, but I'll have for March and April to read it, just because they're so thick and they are dense. And so yeah, this I'm gonna give myself 2 months for each book. So this one is on March's TBR, and then my other two I didn't get to, which are currently keep rolling over. First one I started back in October, and I did not touch these at all this month. I thought I had at the beginning of the month, but nope, I didn't touch them at all. The first one is Shogun by James Clavell. Like I said, I've been reading this since October, and I'm over halfway. I think I have, about a third left of the book to go. But yeah, I just didn't touch it. I was reading other things, so. And then, of course, that will continue to roll over because I am finishing that because now the show's coming out and I really want to watch the show. And then the other one, of course, is the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer. And again, didn't make any more progress. I really want to just get through the Iliad because I know I'll enjoy the Odyssey, but it's really hard to finish the Iliad, but I'm determined to. So this is another one that will just keep rolling over until it gets finished. So there are those two. And now we are into the books. And so the first one that I read, this is again, I go from the bottom and work my way up. I did not have any DNFs, which I consider 1 stars. If I can't even get through it, it's a 1 star. Again, for anybody who's new, I don't rate them on Goodreads or Storygraph though. It's just a 1 star for the purposes of my journal. So there's that. And then I had 3 2 stars, unfortunately. Bottom of the barrel is Bittersweet by Vince Kelly. I was the right way around the first time. So yeah, Bittersweet by Vince Kelly. This is just a little book of poetry, which was for my genre-a-thon. So you can see there, just fragments of life or whatever. Of life in verse, fragments of life in verse. And yeah, it didn't have good flow. Some of the poems didn't really seem to fit theme-wise. Like it seemed kind of all over the place. and I'm not a big poetry person anyway, but one of the things I do enjoy is the flow of the poems. There were some I did enjoy, but for the most part, yeah, I didn't love it. And I found this at a little thrift store, and so I have some like children's poems that I know I'll enjoy. So I went with this one to kind of get outside of my comfort zone. So that was my genre-a-thon pick, and it worked for Spice Girls, a genre you don't typically read because I don't typically read poetry. So that was the bottom of the barrel, unfortunately. Then let's see here. Next, we had another extra one, but it was part of my ABC title challenge, so I really needed to get to it this month because I have them all broken out. And that was The Family Across the Street by Nicole Trope. And this was a steal. I don't remember which team I stole from, but it was an author you haven't read from before. And so with this one, you basically have this family and they move into this nice street. I didn't realize this does take place in Australia. And so you have a bunch of different viewpoints, and the outside viewpoints, like the viewpoints inside the house was really enjoyable, but the outside viewpoints were kind of repetitive and redundant. You have two different people, kind of a neighbor that's I think kind of across the street, and then you have this ex-convict, which is like a delivery driver who's trying to deliver a package to this house, and they just kind of got repetitive as far as like, oh, I think there might be something wrong, but we'll just brush it off. And it just kept like that viewpoint was the same over and over and over again. So I really didn't enjoy those viewpoints, other than kind of the ex-convict and his struggles to get a job and be believed and such. And so that was part of it, but the inside the house I did enjoy overall, like those viewpoints. But yeah, this is family with two little girls, or not two little girls, a girl and a boy, twins. Um, but it does deal with like domestic violence and such, so keep that in mind. But overall, it wasn't terrible. It just wasn't great. So, that's why it only got 2 stars from me. I did kind of struggle to get through it a little bit. Then my last 2 star, unfortunately, was Eldest by Christopher Paolini. And this was for the prompt of dictionary word of the day, which is just a bookworm. So this will go back in the honey jar. And the word I got was jammy, which is like British slang for just, oh, it's so easy. And I was thinking, oh, I'll put this one on because being kind of YA, even though it's a chunky book, they are kind of easy to read. Fortunately, this one wasn't jammy. But it just, I overall enjoyed Aragon. I thought, there were some issues with the writing, like you could tell it wasn't very polished. There was angst that didn't need to be there, but overall the story and the plot line held it, and I overall enjoyed it. This one, you didn't really have a good story. Aragon's training, um and so there's really no progression of the plot there, and nothing really comes to head until the end, and the end I actually enjoyed, but the rest of it was like, and you can tell like he started to try to add a little romance there inside this one, and it just didn't work. Like you can tell he doesn't really understand love and kind of how it works. And so that kind of got annoying. So this one very much felt like it was written by a teenage boy, because it was. But like I said, the plot of the other one held it together and made it enjoyable. This one didn't have that good plot line. It does go back and forth between Aragon's viewpoint and his cousin's viewpoint. And so when it was the cousin's viewpoint, that kind of plot line was a little bit more enjoyable versus Aragon's plot line. But yeah, it was hard to get through. I am still gonna continue the series because I'm hoping it'll get better, but we shall see, because this one was really, really rough. And I know a lot of people love this, but it's not well written. Like, even Aragon wasn't very well written, but the story and the plot was really good, where this one just didn't have that to hold it up. So that's why it only got 2 stars, unfortunately. And so that one I used for a steal from the Cheetah Girls, and it was animal on cover because I was going with the dragon on the cover. So there is that one. And then we have 3 stars as well. The first one I listened to, it's Hard Times by Charles Dickens. I listened to, the narrator was Bertie Clavell, I want to say. But I'll, of course, link it down, or write it down below so you know who narrated it and everything. That one, I listened to it, and again, it was just kind of a weird month for me. And so I did enjoy what I listened to. So basically, you have these 3 kids. 2 of them are siblings, and then the other one kind of gets taken in as a ward. Her dad leaves her behind. He's like part of the circus, and he ends up leaving her behind. And so she gets taken in by this guy, and he has 2 kids. And basically it follows them, and then the one daughter gets married off to somebody who's significantly older, who she doesn't really like. The brother has like gambling problems and such. And then there's like a working class guy who is basically accused of something, and so it's like trying to straighten it all out. And then the girl that gets taken in as kind of a ward, like you don't get a lot of her, and I really liked her character. And so I was hoping for more of her, but it really basically follows the 2 siblings and then this working class guy that kind of gets pulled into the drama. Overall, it wasn't bad. I liked the narrator, but it just didn't really hold my attention very well, which I struggle with audiobooks anyway. I definitely prefer physically reading. But yeah, I listened to it because it was the group read for Kim from Tales from Two Trails. Channel is Expedition Through Pages. It was the group read for her game, which this round we have Battle of 2 teams, so I'm on Team B, and that was Team B's group read. And so yeah, it wasn't bad, but didn't like wow me or really hold my attention. And so I'm sure I missed some stuff in there, and I might have enjoyed it if I had physically read it a little bit more. So that's the bottom of the barrel. Then we had Dorothy Must Die by Danielle Paige. This was the character pick for my game. I got Rabbit, so it was a free choice, and this is one of my ABC Title Challenge books, so it's like, I'll put that in the free choice, make sure I get it read. And I used this to steal, I think, from Destiny's Child, an author that starts, or a title that starts with a D. And so, obviously, Dorothy Must Die. Pretty sure that's where I used it. And again, the premise of this one was really good. It was kind of the execution and the writing. You had the main character, and then you had all these side characters, but it's like they would be in a scene and then just completely forgotten. And so basically, you have the other girl from Kansas that gets swept up by a tornado and goes to Oz, but Oz is not what she knew it to be, from like the book and such. It's completely twisted, so what's considered good is actually kind of evil, and then like the evil witches and such are trying to save everything, and then Dorothy has like totally gone corrupt. It does deal a lot with like addiction. The main character, her mom struggles with addiction, and then Dorothy is addicted to the magic, and so she's siphoning off magic, which is why Oz is in such trouble. But yeah, it was just kind of like not very cohesive, and like I said, the characters, they would be there and then like completely forgotten, and it's like, okay, well, what about this character? So it was like, and I get they're side characters, they're not the main character, but it just didn't feel very cohesive. So that's why I only got 3 stars for me. It was fun, and also the plot didn't progress very well. So on the back, and I hate when synopsises are misleading. It really frustrates me. It's like, did you even read the book? So on the back it says, she's given a mission to remove the Tin Woodman's heart, steal the Scarecrow's brain, take the lion's courage, and then Dorothy must die. And so you're thinking, oh, that's gonna be, the plot of the story. No. that doesn't even come into play until the end. And so that is really, really frustrating. I get this as a series, and so it's going to probably be part of the series, that overall mission, but it's not part of this first book. And so that was really, really frustrating, because that's kind of was my expectation going in. She's going to have like these different missions, and that's going to kind of be the focus, but it wasn't at all. So yeah, it just got 3 stars. I not all that gung ho to continue the series. If I come across the next one or can get it really cheap, I probably will. But it's not one that like I'm gonna make a priority to continue. So there's that. And then the next 3 star is of course my rollover from January, and this one I had used a reward for, just so I could get it on. And that, of course, is Outlander by Gabaldon. This one, the writing's a bit long-winded, which I'm not a big one for long-winded writing. It seems unnecessary at some points, but overall, like, it's a thick book. But overall, I did enjoy it, even though it's a bit long-winded. And my problem with this, that was part of it. That's part of what dropped it down, because it felt unnecessarily long at points. But the toxic relationship between Jamie and Claire, I know this is running a little bit. I've been sick, so anyway, the toxic relationship between Jamie and Claire, like, I get where the author was going, because you have that time period, and so it was maybe not appropriate, but it was acceptable and expected that you disciplined your wife and such, but it just didn't feel true to the character that she created in Jamie, and so that was a bit frustrating. And there was other instances where it was like it was just seemed like they were fighting to add the drama, which is something that gets under my skin. Like, I don't mind that if it fits the character and fits the story, but in some instances it really didn't feel true to these characters. So that got really, really frustrating. Um and I couldn't fully ship them because of it. And like I said, maybe the discipline, like if there was one scene and if that was expected of him, I could understand that. But kind of the way he reacted and then the way she reacted, it just didn't feel true to the characters, and that toxicity in their relationship with the fighting didn't feel true to the characters. And so yeah, I enjoyed it overall, but it was unnecessarily long. Like, there was definitely things that could have been cut out, but it was very immersive. Like, it definitely has stuck with me, and I am definitely interested in diving into the next one, even though I know it's gonna be long-winded again. Like, each one just seems to get longer. And so yeah, it got 3 stars because I didn't fully love it, and there was a lot of things I had issues with. But it was like I was fully immersed in the story. And so it's just kind of middle of the road for me. Like, there was things I really loved, but things I really did not. So there's that one. Now we're up to our 4-star reads. And that is, we have 4 of those. So the first one is, it was for Al, When You Need Info. And so I went with Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban because he goes to school. And when you need info, you go to school. So you learn stuff. And he's learning, about Sirius Black and such. So this, of course, is the 3rd book in the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. And this one is not my favorite. I've said before, it's definitely my least favorite movie. I keep getting it mixed up. There's the one, and it might be the next one, where it's kind of the elf liberation one. And that's the one that sticks out in my mind. And it might be the next one, which is Goblet of Fire, but I like the Goblet of Fire. Like, I like the whole premise of that one. So I don't know, but yeah, I don't love this one. Again, there's a lot of angst in there, which makes sense. Like, I know teenagers get angsty, but I don't know, the whole issue with Ron and Hermione and the cat and Scabbers, it just gets really, really annoying to me. And Harry and, I'm gonna be mangry and go after Sirius Black. I don't know. It just it gets under my skin. I do not love this one. I don't like the movie. It's my least favorite movie. But it still got 4 stars because I do enjoy the writing and it's very nostalgic for me and everything like that. So that's where that one landed. I don't remember. I don't think I said I used Outlander for a still read a romance book, which I think was TLC if I'm recalling right. And this one, I don't remember what I used it for. Oh, I did. Okay. So I used it to read a book with a sport in it. So this was one of the Spice Girl prompts, and because Quidditch, and that's a big thing, that's what I used it for. So there is that one. Then we have our next book, which was for the 5 W's, which is a bookworm, and this one will go back in. And that was Alex Trebek. The answer is Reflections on My Life. And I used it for the Spice Girl prompt to read a book with what blah 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 word, and one of those words was life. And since the little subtitle has that word, that's what I used it for. This one, I love how the pictures were done. So the pictures are incorporated throughout the book, and where, whatever paragraph he's talking about, kind of that moment in that picture, it's incorporated throughout the book, which I really liked. One of the things that really frustrates me about memoirs is how they just stick a chunk of pictures in the middle somewhere, and you have to okay, he talked about that, or in that chapter or whatever. And it also breaks up the chapter, where this one, there was a couple that was kind of broken like mid-sentence or whatnot, but for the most part, it was like at the end of the chapter, or the beginning of the chapter, or, after a paragraph. And so it really worked. Like, I love the placement of the pictures in this one. The writing is very simple. I'm pretty sure, because there's no acknowledgments or anything, but it talks about the author. I'm pretty sure he wrote those himself and didn't use a ghostwriter, which most celebrity memoirs use ghostwriters. It's very simple, but I actually appreciated that. I saw a review that was mad because it was so simple, and it didn't fit with their image of Alex Trebek, but I really liked how simple it was, and just, it's very much a memoir, more than like most memoirs are kind of memoirs slash biographies a little bit. This one was more memoir because it was really just random thoughts. Which most memoirs I have a problem with because it's kind of written more like biographical style, and sometimes they don't always follow like a timeline, and I get a little lost. Where in this case, it was just kind of whatever he was thinking about when he sat down to write. Some of them are very short, like a page and a half, if that. Some of them just a couple pages, others, more than that. Especially once he kind of gets into talking about Jeopardy, those chapters are a little bit longer. And it really was kind of fun. I'm not a big Jeopardy watcher, not a huge fan, but I was really interested in this because even though I wasn't a huge Jeopardy watcher or a huge fan of Alex Trebek, it's such an integral part of American life, you know? You know who Alex Trebek is, you know who Jeopardy, there's references to Jeopardy all the time, like the theme song, like, so I just, overall, I really enjoyed this, but it was kind of random. I like kind of the reflection. He mentions multiple times, of course, his cancer diagnosis and kind of coming to terms with that. And so I kind of like that reflection on that, and, the future of the world and trying to do some good in the world. And like I said, I did like the behind the scenes of Jeopardy as well. And so, yeah, if you like Jeopardy or you're interested at all, I say, why it wasn't the most amazingly written memoir. It was definitely one of the more impactful ones. So this one was really, really good. So yeah, there's that one. Then we had For the Throne by Hannah Whitten, which is the second in the Wilder Words series. And this one I had chosen for the Three Bears and family centered because it follows two sisters one's for the wolf and one's for the throne. And so this is more following the second sister. And I really enjoyed this one. I probably like this sister and her main love interests more than the characters from For the Wolf, but I just didn't really fully get into the story like I did with For the Wolf. And that might have been, it was this month that I read it and I was already struggling. It might have been partly that. I really don't know, but there was just something like I would find myself kind of zoning out and then I'm reading and get back to the story. And it was kind of cool because there's like kind of an underworld element to it. And so I really liked that. And there's the theme this month was definitely like gods and goddesses, like old kind of style gods. And so you deal a lot with that in this story. And yeah, I liked it and I really liked the characters, but I can't say why exactly I didn't connect. And like I said, it might be me. I might reread this at some point, which I do plan to. And I might reread it and be like, oh, wow, this is really good. And so that might change. But right now it's a 4-star because I just found myself kind of zoning out and not fully connecting to it, especially because it would go back between viewpoints. And so, which it did in the other one too. But the other one, it just seemed to work a little bit better as far as flow wise. This one, it like would take me out of the story a little bit. So yeah, this is For the Throne. Like I said, one's For the Wolf. It's definitely based kind of on different fairy tales. So some people say it's based on Red Riding Hood. Some people say Beauty and the Beast. Those definitely both play a role in there. And then also you have like the Snow White element. The fairy tale element is definitely more prevalent in the first one than in this one, but that element's still there. So I thought it was really good. I like the duology, but it just, like I said, for whatever reason, I couldn't quite connect it to it. This one I stole from Destiny's Child, and it was to read a book with royalty because of Queen Bee. So that was my steal there. Then the next one was a steal. I think it was Cheetah Girls. Yeah. And it was one of their buddy reads, and that is God Killer by Hannah Kaner. And it also worked for a Spice Girl prompt to read a book that you're interested in, you're curious about, but you're not ready to spend money on. And I had a credit, so I got it digitally. And I had a credit from Amazon, so I was able to spend no money on it and I could read it because I have been interested in it. And again, there was just something about this one that I didn't fully connect with, which is why I only got 4 stars. But all the elements were there. I really liked how you had different, like, age ranges. That is something I really, really enjoy in a book. So basically, you have the main character, and she is a god killer. Something happens to her when she's a child, kind of, and so she, when she grows up, she ends up becoming a god killer. There was this big war on the gods, and so gods are like banned in this kingdom, but of course you still have people that are praying to these gods, and when they pray they can bring like new gods to life and such. And so she's a god killer, and she ends up with this ex-knight and this child, and they're having to go to this big city where the war, the main like epicenter of the war happened. And so they're trying to travel to the city, but nobody's allowed in the city. And yeah, I thought it was really like the premise and such was really, really good, but there's just something that I just couldn't fully connect to. But I like kind of that old god again, like the old gods and the praying to them and such. And I liked, that there's a little bit of a mystery with this girl, and she has like this mini god, and they're trying to figure out like what's the deal with him. And there is kind of an unreliable narrative around that mini god, so I really enjoyed that as well. So overall, I enjoyed it, and I'm definitely looking forward to picking up the next book. But like I said, I just didn't fully connect, and again, it might just be me and where my mind was this month, but that was that. And I forgot to mention, I did have another digital book, which was a rollover. I forgot to mention it when I mentioned the rollovers because, again, I don't have it physically. And that was 1,000 Perfect Notes by C.G. Drews. And that was actually the pick for Autism Reads, which is put on by Christine and an autistic reader. That was the pick for February. I have started it, but I just didn't get to it in February. So that one's rolling over. And so I just did want to mention that because I forgot about that one. But again, that was just an extra book. And I chose it for my buzzword as well because it was a positive word. And perfect is a positive word in my mind. It can be negative, I think, because something can be too perfect, but it is overall a positive word. And so that one's rolling over and I have started it. So there's that, but I forgot to mention that. So I didn't want to mention it while it was in my mind. Then we have our 5-star reads. And this was kind of hard. I had a hard time deciding which route I was going to go. And so first up we had another bookworm, and this was by a favored author, so recommended by a favored author. And I went on Goodreads. Nora Roberts didn't have like a lot there. This is going back in the honey jar. She didn't have a lot, and so I ended up going to Carissa Broadbent because every book I've read by Carissa Broadbent has been 5 stars. And one of the books she had on, I don't remember if it was recently read or currently reading, but that was Death by Laura Thalassa. And this is the 4th book in the Four Horsemen series. And I love this series. Like, I really enjoyed it overall. Pestilence, I think, is still my favorite. I kind of was like, do I like this one better or do I like that one? And I don't know, there was just something about Pestilence that I really liked. But I really enjoyed this one as well. And so basically you have the 4 horsemen and they're coming to Earth. And so it's kind of post-apocalyptic because they originally, when they first come to Earth, all like electronics and advancements just break. And then each horseman is coming through and like riding through towns and killing people and such. So the last horseman is Death. And this one I liked because, like, the other ones you could kind of read on their own. You didn't necessarily need to read them like in a certain order or anything like that. But this one definitely ties them all together. And so you have appearances from the other brothers. And I liked Death. Like the other ones, like war and famine kind of enjoyed the killing, and so I didn't necessarily always connect with them. Especially with war, there was kind of like a toxicity there, and how, I mean, it's toxic anyway. You have these horsemen killing humanity, and then these women falling in love with them. These are dark romances. So it's kind of toxic in its nature, but especially with war, how they came together was a bit much for me, but it was still 5-star just based on the writing. And so yeah, I really enjoyed Death. The ending wasn't like perfect for me, but I enjoyed it enough. It still got 5 stars. And this one I used for a highly anticipated read because it definitely was. And some of the prompts were the same for throughout the team. So as long as like you could fulfill it for like another team, if you already fulfilled it for your own team and such, you could fulfill it multiple times as long as it was on a different team. You couldn't use multiple books for the same prompt, but as long as it was on a different team, you could. So you'll see I have some more highly anticipated ones. But yeah, this one was a highly anticipated read, and I used it as a still, I think, from Cheetah Girls. Yeah. And so yeah, that was Death, and I really did enjoy that one. And then this one, I was worried about this one when I first started. So this was an extra one. My husband and I did start it in January, but we read a lot of it in February, and so I counted it. And for this one, it was another steal from a different team for highly anticipated read. Of course, that's Inheritance by Nora Roberts. I read this with my husband. We read it out loud, and so like at bedtime, if we weren't super tired, we would just read a chapter or so. And I was worried at the beginning because the beginning is very slow. And I was like, I don't know about this because her last series was kind of like that. It was very slow paced and more drawn out. In the past, the way she has structured her series, so basically at the end of the year, she comes out with a series books, and typically they're like a trilogy. And then in, I think, May, she comes out with like a romantic suspense standalone book. And so this is a new trilogy that came out, you know, November, got it for Christmas, and then we started reading it in January. But typically, the way she structures her trilogies is you have 6 different couples, and so each book is following this different couple, and they're kind of like a group, but each book is focused on a different couple. Her last one, she didn't do that. It was focused on one couple, and again, it was very drawn out, very slow paced. And like the first book, I didn't completely love because it was so slow paced. This one, we at least got some action, and so I'm really, and the way it ended, it was so good the way it ended, and I cannot wait to jump into the next one. But of course, I have to wait until the end of November before it even comes out, which is a shame because it was so good the way it ended. But yeah, it started off really slow, and I'm thinking, here we go again. And it does seem like it's going to mainly focus on this couple. There's another couple that's a potential love interest that I think is going to come into play. And then there is a third couple, but they just kind of made very brief appearances, so I don't know how much they're going to be involved in the story. But the second pair is definitely very involved in the story. But basically, you have the main character and her fiance. She catches him in bed with her cousin, so she ends up calling off the wedding, and then she learns she's inherited this house basically, um up in Maine. And so she goes, and the house is haunted. So you have this old Victorian house on a cliff, and it's haunted, and there's a curse that they're going to be having to figure out. It doesn't really come into play like them fully figuring it out in this one, but you know that's gonna pick up, especially based on the ending. There's cute dogs, like it's just, Nora Roberts is my favorite author, and even when her stuff isn't that great, it's just, she's so easy to read, and it's such just a comfort for me just to dive into her books because I know it's going to be easy, and I know I can just, dive in and not have to think a lot and just enjoy them. But I was really glad this kind of turned it around and ended up being 5 stars for me, especially because some of the ghosts are kind of quirky. There's a lot of ghosts, and some of them are kind of quirky, and so at first I was like, I don't know about this. Like, this is weird, but there's definitely a creep factor as well with this one ghost and the curse and everything like that. And so yeah, I ended up really, really enjoying this. So there is that one. And like I said, this wasn't for anything. It's just my husband and I were reading it because she's my favorite author. And so we've been reading her series together. Then the next one was for Rapunzel and its anti-Prince Charming. And for that, I chose The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. So again, I've been giving everything of hers 5 stars. I absolutely love her writing. This is a part of a duology. It's a duology that's part of a like bigger series. I think it's going to be like 6 books total. So it's basically set in the same world, but each set is going to be a duology. So this is the second one. The first one was The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I didn't love that one. I think part of that, I mean, I gave it 5 stars. I did enjoy it. I did really, really enjoy it. But part of it was I love the War of Lost Hearts trilogy so, so much. I love Tasana and Max together. I love them as characters. I just really, really enjoyed it. And so it just didn't quite live up to that one for me. And in the first one, you have the Kajari, which is basically this competition, and a very, violent competition where lots of death. And whoever wins gets a wish from the goddess Nyaxia. So again, you have kind of that goddess theme there, which I really enjoy. And so whoever wins gets this wish. And the main character, Raya, is the adopted daughter of this vampire king. There's different houses, so there's 3 different houses: the House of Night, the House of Shadow, and the House of Blood. And in the House of Night, there's 2 different factions. And so her father has been on the throne for like 200 years or whatnot, and she basically wants to win so she can get stronger because she's prey in a predator world. And so there's this other vampire that's part of the other faction, still House of Night, but part of the other faction. And so they're basically kind of an uneasy alliance there, and then sort of enemies to lovers. Like, it's very complicated. This one, definitely enemies to lovers, but it's just the first one. I think that competition element, like, it's not something I fully love, and it just didn't quite live up. Their relationship too didn't live up to like Tasana and Max, but this definitely brought it around a little bit for me. Like, after this one, I love the series a little bit more. Still not anywhere near the War of Lost Hearts trilogy. That was my favorite, but I do enjoy this a little bit more. So this is kind of following the aftermath of the Kajari, and so there's a lot of like political intrigue and warfare and such. Um, yeah, her writing is just so good. And even though, again, chunky books, it's really accessible and easy to read, which I really, really love. And yeah, we learned some more secrets. One thing I really appreciate about this is, she has her adopted vampire father. And so there's kind of a toxicity there too. And I really kind of like, she loves her father so much, but now she's coming to realize, like, some of the things he did weren't okay. And so I kind of like that dynamic there. And then the dynamic between Araya and Rain as well. And kind of the way the author handled that. Like, sometimes, especially with enemies to lovers, it's kind of like, okay. Like, what? Like, they just fall into bed and then they just automatically decide they like each other or whatnot. And it doesn't always feel believable, but in this case, even once they, were developing their relationship, like, they still had kind of that mindset. Like, it just wasn't boom, okay, I automatically trust you and I love you and such. They still had to work through it, and I like that aspect. So there's that one. Then next, this was really hard. I didn't know where to place this one. So this one was Encanto, and it was Spanish rep. And I forgot to say, Ashes and the Star-Cursed King was also an anticipated read, if I'm remembering right. I think I stole it too. No, it was for my team, but it was a highly anticipated read. And this one was to read a book that has either BIPOC or um, LGBTQ plus rep. And so this one was for BIPOC, and that is by Pam Munoz Ryan, and it's Echo. This is a middle grade, and I love this so much. It was so good. I read one other book by this author, and I enjoyed it because it like dealt with horses and such, but it wasn't amazing, and so this one was amazing. So if you're looking for a middle grade World War II book, this is one to pick up. It was really good. So basically, it starts off like in fairy tale fashion, and it ends in fairy tale fashion. But in between, you're following these three kids kind of before and during World War II. The first one is German, and he's not Jewish or anything, but he has like a big birthmark. And then he also had epilepsy when he was a baby. He hasn't had it since like he was 1 year old, but as a baby he had epilepsy, and then he has this big birthmark on his face. So he's not considered pure, and there's like this law, and he's gonna have to get sterilized and such. So there's kind of that prejudice against him, and I really like that one because the daughter is, Hitler Youth. Like, she supports the cause, like, she's really into it. And so you kind of see that family divide. And there's a musical element to this, which is so cool. And the way it connects each of these three very different lives through that musical element was just chef's kiss. I absolutely loved it. So first you have the little German boy, and like I said, he has a defect, and he had epilepsy, and so he's gonna have to get sterilized, and so they're kind of trying to escape. And his father is a musician, and he has like Jewish friends, and so he gets taken away because he's a Jewish sympathizer. And it was just really good. Like, each mini story was really good on its own, and then the way she combined them all together was perfect. So then the next one, and it follows this harmonica is what's kind of connecting them. So then the next one is this orphan in, I think, Philadelphia, and it's him and his brother, and he's trying to keep his brother. So the German boy's trying to save his father because his father's in jail. Then this boy's trying to save his brother, and they're just orphans. And so they basically kind of get this opportunity. The woman who runs the orphanage isn't very nice, and she's, wanting to send him out for work, and then his brother, she plans on getting these older kids because she can send them out for work and such. And so the youngers is what they call them. She plans to adopt them all out, and so she wants to send his brother away from him, and he wants to keep them together. But then at the end, it just comes down to keeping him out of the state home, because as bad as this orphanage is, it's not as bad as the state home. And so he's really trying to save his brother. And then the harmonica ends up in California with this Spanish girl, and her father gets this job opportunity to run this farm that's owned by a Japanese man who him and his family got sent to a concentration camp. And there's some prejudice, against the Japanese, but also her, like, where she was living, they didn't have that prejudice. And now when she goes, like, she's sent to a separate school, and so she's having to face this prejudice because she's Spanish, and she's like, what is this? Like, and the school is like to teach them English and Americanize them, and she's like, I am American and I already know English, like she's above her class and such. And so it's dealing with that prejudice, and then it all comes around in the end and ties together, and then it goes back to the fairy tale. So good. Like I said, if you're looking for a middle grade World War II story, especially if you want like some music cool aspects, like this is really, really good. I absolutely love this. But it did not quite be out my last one, which this was again an extra one, because I needed a book that started with S for a Spice Girls prompt, and that was Six Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent. This is a little novella from the Crowns of Nyaxia series, and it follows like two side characters from the the main series, the duology. It follows two side characters. It kind of takes place in between the two books. I read it last because, like I said, it's a novella, and it is kind of separate on its own. But I really liked getting, you kind of get a look at the characters in the second book, but understanding them a little bit more in this book, especially the main character Lilith. And so basically, Vale is a vampire, and he's kind of he's like the head of war for in the second book, basically. And so this one is before he kind of came back, because, like I said, there's different factions. And so he's kind of in the human world, and so you have Lilith, and she's been very, very sick her whole life, and hasn't expected to make it. And then you have her sister, and then there's like this plague basically going on. Again, you have gods and such, and so they basically made a god mad. And so there's this plague that's happening, and so she ends up going to Vale because she's a scientist, so it's very like science-y, and she's studying his blood to see if she can use his blood to save basically her sister, but also the rest of the village. And of course they end up falling in love. I really enjoyed this one. She's neurodivergent, which in the Ashes and Starcursed King, like they mentioned, she's very blunt and a little bit different. But they're vampires, they don't spend a lot of time with humans, so you don't really get that neurodivergentness from the Ashes and Starcursed King. But once you start reading this and you're getting it from her viewpoint, like she doesn't like to make eye contact, like she's just I really enjoyed this. Like I loved everything about it. You got everything. So sometimes novellas, they're not as well developed, and I personally don't enjoy them as much because I want more. This one, it had everything you needed. It felt like it had a good plot. It wrapped up really well. And just, her character, and I did like Vale too, but I especially liked her character and that neurodivergentness. Like, I absolutely loved it. And yeah, I can see myself if I just need a Carissa Broadbent fix, but I don't want to dive into one of her chunky books. I can see myself reading this over and over and over again. Like I said, and it had everything. Like, it was fully developed, even as a novella. So that was the top one, and like I said, I used it for a book that starts with S. So that is everything. Of course, I always do my top 3, which don't necessarily correspond with the star ratings. Star ratings literally how well I thought it was written and the enjoyment, where the top 3 is more about the impact and what's sticking with me after I've read it. And so the first one is definitely Echo. Like I said, that musical aspect I absolutely loved. I like that take. It was very different from other World War II stories I've read, and I absolutely loved it. The fairy tale component, the way it started and ended with a fairy tale, was amazing. The way she tied these lives together, because you have Germany and Philadelphia, then California, and the way she tied those all together, I thought was really well done. And then kind of the prejudice and then that diversity as well. I mean, you have Germany, and then you have a Spanish girl, and so I really like kind of the diversity and then the prejudice that each different one faced. Like even the two brothers, yes, they were white, but they were orphans, and so there was definitely prejudice there as well. The second one, even though it was only 3 stars, is actually Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. The setting of it, like in the Scottish Highlands, I mean, who doesn't like that setting? The time travel aspect. Like, I always like time travel. I don't read a whole lot of time travel books, but when I do, I typically really, really enjoy them. And it's always interesting to see how like they handle like the logistics of it, and I really like that. I thought the writing was very immersive. Like it definitely, like I said, it's still sticking with me, and it definitely drew me in. So I really like that, and I thought the characters were pretty dynamic, and well developed. Like I really enjoyed the characters. You get very different personalities and such, and I thought that was really well done. And then the last one is Inheritance by Nora Roberts. The ghost, like I said, at first I wasn't so sure about the quirkiness of the ghost, but as we read the book, they really started to grow on me. The Victorian house. I love a house in a story. Like, I love a house that is prominent in a story, and this one definitely is. There's the cute dogs. There's 3 different dogs. The main dog is Yoda, and I just, I'm a dog person in general. I love dogs in stories, but these dogs are extra cute, and I love them. And then that curse and kind of mystery regarding the curse, I really enjoy that as well. So that is it for my wrap up. As always, a long one. I just can't seem to help myself with my wrap ups. But let me know if you read any of these, if you're interested in reading any of these now that I've talked about them a little bit, what your favorite read from February was. And I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.